Now, under our Act, we can investigate complaints about unfair market practices. As I mentioned, the Act is very generously drafted, and it doesn't define what an unfair market practice is, and it doesn't define what a small business is either, which is pretty handy, because I don't have to worry about who fits where. I'll just look at resolving any dispute. And we take this very broad view of what an unfair market practice is up there on the screen. What we've noticed with unfair market practices, though, is you can have, and I know it's been a bit of a theme today about unfair clauses in contracts, where people write in the clause in the contract and it's clearly sort of unfair. But you can also have a clause which is fair enough, but the behaviour in terms of operating within that clause of the contract is unfair. With unfair clauses, well, they keep cropping up, and one of the favourite ones I like to talk about is one we came across in a franchise case, where the clause said that if the franchisor believed that the franchisee had breached the clause in the contract or in the agreement, the franchisee immediately became liable for any legal costs the franchisor incurred in having that alleged breach, not proven breach, but alleged breach, rectified. And we had this case of a franchisor who was represented by one of the big blue chip law firms in Australia, in this area in fact. They were representing the franchisor, and in fact they'd drawn this agreement with a term like that. And the franchisor felt the franchisee had breached the agreement, so they started looking to have it remedied. These legal letters coming from the big law firm. So the franchisee thought better get legal advice too, and so they went to their suburban solicitor, who'd probably done their will for them or they conveyed their house. Hadn't had a lot of experience with franchises, but a bit like the guy in the movie The Castle. Yeah, he had the vibe, he had the vibe about franchises, and that was going to be enough to get him by. So he starts advising the franchisee. Eventually the matter came to us on difficulties with the franchise agreement, and anyhow we became aware of all these legal costs being heaped on the franchisee, so much so it got to a stage where the franchisor's lawyers had billed the franchisee for $33,000 in legal costs for advice that they'd been giving to try and have the breach remedied. At the same time, our suburban solicitor with the vibe, who was advising the franchisee, and you assume he's advising on the same sorts of issues, his bill was $3,750. So he had a bit to learn about charging, I think, but notwithstanding that, it was clear that there was a real intimidation coming from the side of the major law firm. So I took a different tack with this one. I'll put to one side for the moment the franchise agreement issues, and of my own motion, I said I was going to investigate the big law firm for unfair market practices. I felt that was unfair, that what they were doing. And I wrote to the CEO of the law firm, who was based in Sydney, and he sent some people around to see me, from Melbourne-based people, and we had a mediation where we mediated all of the issues between the parties, and that $33,000 bill turned into something far more realistic. But that's an example about how something can be not illegal, but it can be unfair, and in my view, unacceptable behaviour. And I don't allow myself to get tied down by concepts of what does unfair mean or what does unconscionable mean. If it doesn't seem right, maybe I'm the person with the vibe, but if it doesn't appear to be what the sort of behaviour that we want to have in Victoria or in Australia, well, I'm prepared to sort of shake the tree a bit. Informed decision making. I jumped ahead of myself, which is what I do. I already talked about that and told you about the highlighters. Ken, I've only got a minute or so, I suppose. Just very quickly, I'll tell you what we did about addressing these unacceptable business issues. I wrote to 400 business leaders in Australia saying that we'd identified these sorts of problems, that a lot of disputes could have been avoided if people would behave better. I got very encouraging responses, that they were appalled by bullying and intimidation that might have been carried out by people that they were responsible for, whether as their employees or whether people they were contracting with or outsourced things to. We engaged Deloitte to help us with doing a report, and the report identified 7 steps towards business success. And basically the report, which is the summary of it, is what we've left on your seats there, is the product of picking the brains of 50 successful business leaders in Australia and distilling what they put together as being the key things that you need to be doing if you're going to have a successful, if you're going to form a successful business relationship and if you're going to maintain one. And they start with aligning values. Make sure that the way your principles and ethics and values line up with the person you're going to be doing business with. If you've got doing business with someone who says, look, I can get a cheaper price for the goods that you want, because there's a truck that pulls up down the end of the block every fortnight and I just go and help myself and I can sell it to you for cheap. Don't do business with those people, and they're in the criminal area, so that's one extreme example of it. This idea of commitment, the business leaders tell us to commit to a business relationship as though it's long term, even though at first you might think it's only going to be a one-off short one, but treat all of them the same way. There's got to have in that business relationship a mutual interest. Both of you got to be making something out of it. Try to avoid business relationships where there's not something in it for the other side. Communication, well, that seems obvious enough, but it's very important, and the full report, if you look at it, will tell you that the business leaders say you've got to get right down into the nitty-gritty about communication. You should have arrangements in place or agreement with your business, the people you're doing business with, as to how you're going to communicate, how often. Is it going to be by email, is it going to be by telephone, is it going to be weekly meetings, monthly meetings, a combination of all of those. The 5th one was about accountability and responsibility, and what they're getting at here in brief is that if something goes wrong in the relationship, don't sweep it under the carpet and say, oh, we'll see if we can fix it. Tell the other people, have it out there. Be clear about it. Professional conduct, here again is an expectation, if you're governed by any professional conduct rules, that the people you're doing business with will abide by those. And then one that surprised us, but we were happy to see, these business leaders said that pre-agreed dispute resolution procedures are vital to be agreed before you enter into a relationship. So work out with the people you're doing business with, how are you going to sort out a dispute? And I don't mind if you put in your contracts, we'll refer them to the Small Business Commissioner to mediate disputes. You can do that, I'm happy about that. But have that in place. It's like an employment arrangement. The only time you can meaningfully talk to your new employer about termination of employment is before you start. It's no good trying to talk about these sorts of things when you're down the track. That's where you can contact us, and there's a what I call it, a call centre number there, 1300, a toll-free number, and you can get through to our call centre. Thank you for the opportunity of joining you today.